Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I want to show you guys the basics of setting up a animated character inside of the Unity engine. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play on my existing scene right now, and you can see I can move him around just fine, but there's no animations included in this. So if I look at the prefab, if we look at the prefab for this character, you can see we have a sprite renderer. In order to actually change the frames and add animations, we're going to need a animator component. So I'm going to add to my prefab a animator. So search for that. Looks like this. And then you can see in the animator that we're going to need a animator controller. So I sometimes like to put these inside of the directory where I'm storing all the scripts and the prefabs for my player. So I might have a animator controller inside of here, or a animator override controller, which is basically where you can replace the animations in a animator controller with a different set, but keeping all of the same connections from the original animator controller. So for right now, I'm going to right click in this folder, and we're just going to add in a fresh animator controller. So let's go ahead and create that in here. I'll call it AC for animator controller underscore player. And now in the player prefab, we can take this animator controller and we can just drag it into the runtime animator controller slot. So if we double click on this animator controller, then you're going to see the animator window where you have an entry point and exit point, which we actually aren't going to use. And then you'll be able to set up these different nodes where you can switch between animations. So for a top-down game like this, where the player needs to face up, down, left, and right, depending on whichever animation they're doing, you may need to include 4 variations of the same animation. So you will need a idle up, an idle down, an idle left, and an idle right, as well as a walk up, left, down, and right animation. So the way that you set all of that up with one group for each animation type is with a blend tree. So we can right click into here and do create state from new blend tree. You'll see a new parameter is set up here called blend, but we're actually going to need 2 parameters because our blend tree is going to work depending on our X and Y input, and those are going to be separate floats. You can't just put a vector as a parameter for the animator, at least at the moment. So let's go ahead and rename this blend tree to idle, and then I'm going to double click into the motion for this blend tree. And here you can see the parameter for our blend tree is currently blend, but we actually need 2 parameters, so we're going to change the blend type to 2D simple directional. And now you can see that there's 2 parameters that we're going to need here. So I'm going to rename blend to X input, and then let's also add in Y input. So Y input, we can actually just call those whatever that you want. So we're going to have X input be the left and right, the first variable, and then Y input as the second. And with these inputs, we'll be able to automatically switch between which direction for the idle animation we're going to face. So now for this motion category, let's click into here and add a new motion field. Okay, so here is where we're going to put our animation, and we're going to need 4 of these for each of the directions, and then we're going to match it to the position X and position Y. So when our parameters most closely match the motion values, it's going to show that motion above the other ones. So let's add in here 3 more motion values. As soon as we add our second one, you can see this kind of graph thing pop up. So let's add a couple more. So our first motion will be facing the right, so that's going to be +1 for the X and 0 on the Y. Our second one will be facing up, which will be 0 and then 1 for the Y. And then we want left, which is going to be -1 and 0. And then we need one for the bottom, so that's going to be 0 and -1. And you can see the 4 points are going to reflect that. And as our input values go closer to 1 point, it's going to show a specific motion / animation depending on our input values. And the setup will be basically the same for the walk animations as well. So let's go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to Command D this and duplicate this over here. So I'm going to call this walk. And if we jump into the blend tree, it's going to take the same inputs, and it's going to have these same 4 positions for our motions. The only difference is going to be the motions themselves. So now let's click on our player and set up those animations. We can open up the animation window in order to create those animation timelines. You can do that with window and then animation here. Or you can see it's Command 6 or possibly Control 6 on Windows. Okay, so in this animation window, we can start creating animation clips, which we'll be able to play in those motion fields. So let's go ahead and create our idle animations. So the first one I'll go ahead and call idle right. And let's save that into this animation folder I have, just to kind of keep them organized, since we are going to have quite a few animations when we're done with our character. Okay, so for this idle right animation, we can add in a property. Let's take the sprite renderer, and we're going to have a sprite property here. So the sprite property, you can expand it if you want to see what frame it's going to be showing for your character. And in this case, we have the right frame here. We want to idle right, which is just going to be facing the right. We can also remove this frame at the end. Since this animation does not need to go on for a second, it's actually just a single frame. So we can just remove that. And then the animation will just loop here between the first fraction of a second. So let's create another clip like this. I will call it idle left. Okay, and then we need to add in another sprite property here. So this time, let's change the sprite. So inside of the art for your character, go ahead and look for the frames that you need. If you don't know the exact name of the frame, you can zoom in a little bit and be able to see thumbnails for each of your frames. So here we can see this frame is facing the left. So I'm going to drag that into here and then make sure that this is positioned at 0 seconds, 0 frames. And then be sure to remove this character from the end, and then that will be your idle left. So just do this for idle up and down as well. Okay, and by the way, you can also just automatically add in the sprite property by just dragging your frame straight into here. So that can save you a little bit of time. We just need this at frame 0, and then let's create our idle down and drag this into there. Okay, so now we can click on our blend tree, go to the inspector, and we can put these 4 motions in. So if we click on the motion icon, we can see our animations here. And you know what? I do want to make it a little bit more descriptive what these animations are. So before we do that, I'm going to go into the animations folder, and I'm going to just rename these and prefix them with the word player. That way it'll be really clear exactly what this is meant to be. Okay, so back on the blend tree, let's drag in each of these motions to their respective area. So facing the right, position 1 for X, that is going to be player idle right here. And then we're going to need player idle left for down here. And then 1 for the up is going to be player idle up. And then lastly, we want player idle down. Okay, so now that the motions are set up, you can kind of see how it's going to be going closer to one of the animations, depending on where we're at. Whichever one matches our parameters closest is going to be the one that's going to show. Okay, so now let's jump up to the base layer. These animations were created here, but they already exist as motions in the idle blend tree, so I'm just going to cut those away, delete them. And now if we are actually able to set our X import, Y import properties in the player script, then we can get those directions to change. So my custom script here is the player controller script, so I'm going to go ahead and edit that. So in my player controller script, wherever you get the import values that are allowing you to move a certain direction, in this case, I'm using the import manager, which is available in Window Package Manager. It's the new import manager. So when I press the move keys down, I get those returned as the move import here. And I'm using this value to move for this move player function, which does collision checking and then actually moving the player with kinematic movement. Just glossing over that for now. So what we want to do with this move import whenever we get it is we also want to tell the animator that this value has changed so that it shows up for this animator parameters and can be fed down to the idle blend tree. So what we need in the script is going to be referenced to this animator component. So up here at the top, I can declare a private animator. And then when our script starts, let's get reference to that. Animator equals get component. Okay, now that we have the animator, when we go down here and we get our import for our movement function, we can do animator.setFloat, which is the type of the float. Then we need the name of the parameter, which is X input. And we're going to do move import dot X. Since this is a vector 2 up here, it's going to have our X value and our Y value. And we also need animator dot set float Y input. And that is, of course, going to be move import.y. So one last thing we're going to want to put here is going to be that this value is only going to be set if the move import is not 0, 0, because on the last frame where we let go of our move keys, we don't want to reset the direction where the character is going to be idling in. So if we were pressing right and we had a move x of 1, but then we let go, it's going to reset that move import to a x of 0, but we want it to keep facing the character right. So when the move import is 0, 0, so let's do if move import does not equal vector2.0, then that's going to be where we set these values. So we only actually set the yx input if the player is actually moving. Okay, so now that that's set up, if we press right, we're going to face right. If we press up, we're going to face up. And note that when we let go, it doesn't reset our x and y import to 0, 0 on the animation parameters. This way, when we're actually moving, it's just going to face the direction where we last tried to move. And that is what you actually want. Otherwise, you might have it reset to face the right when you are actually facing the left because you let go of the keys. So this is what we're looking for. So in the next video, I will set up the walking animations and show you how to do the transition between idle states and the walking states.